The allegations Meghan has made are simply not true. Her account does not reflect what actually happened, and it has led the public to a deeply misleading impression. That version of events has no basis in...
The meeting lasted less than an hour, but by the time Meghan walked out, the relationship between her and Prince William had changed forever. There were no advisors beside them, no cameras waiting, and no carefully rehearsed smiles to soften the moment. Behind a closed palace door, William delivered a message so final that Meghan reportedly remained seated after he stood up, as though she had not yet accepted what she had heard. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William arrived first at Windsor Castle, dismissed the aide outside, and placed a thin folder on the table without opening it. Windsor Castle is one of the monarch's principal residences, but that day its importance came from privacy, not ceremony. Months of strained communication had pushed the Sussexes and the senior household into exchanges through lawyers, private secretaries, and formal emails. Meghan wanted something different. She wanted one direct conversation without intermediaries, believing a face-to-face meeting could reopen a personal channel and create a path back into family negotiations. The prince offered no such path. He told her clearly that she would no longer be included in private royal discussions, informal reconciliation meetings, or decisions involving the Wales children. From that moment, all official contact would pass through palace representatives. A palace representative is an authorized aide who communicates for senior royals, and the meaning was unmistakable. The personal channel between them was closed before she even arrived. Meghan did not erupt. She leaned forward, asked whether the decision came from him alone, and searched his face for hesitation. William held her gaze, but the pause before his answer carried more pain than anger. He remembered the hope surrounding her arrival, yet he believed trust had been damaged too deeply to keep pretending private words were safe. The decision did not sound like victory. It sounded like emotional amputation. The leaked account came through a documented recollection provided by a palace insider familiar with the meeting. It recorded Meghan offering one final compromise. Both sides would privately agree to stop speaking about past grievances. William refused, convinced that earlier assurances had repeatedly collapsed once public pressure returned. Then she stood, steadied herself, and asked one final question about Catherine. His expression changed at once. That reaction revealed the meeting was never only about protocol, access, or reputation. Something involving his wife had driven him to the point of no return. To understand why Catherine's name changed the entire temperature of that room, the people behind the conflict, and what each of them feared losing, must be brought into focus. This was never simply a disagreement between a prince and his sister-in-law. William entered that room carrying the weight of a future crown, a wounded brother, and a wife he believed had been repeatedly dragged into battles she never chose. Meghan entered carrying a different wound, the conviction that she had been judged before she was understood. Between them stood Harry, absent from the room but present in every unfinished sentence. William had spent years trying to separate his duties from his emotions, but that separation was collapsing. As Harry's older brother, he still remembered the private loyalty that had once joined them. As the future monarch, the person expected to inherit the crown and protect its stability, he knew every private concession could create a new expectation. One act of softness might weaken the boundary he had drawn, yet one act of firmness could deepen the rupture with the brother he had once protected without hesitation. Meghan carried a different fear into the meeting. Since leaving royal duties, she believed other people had been allowed to explain her motives, describe her choices, and define her place in the family without her involvement. Courtiers, the palace officials who manage royal schedules and communication, had become barriers between her and the people she wanted to confront directly. She saw this conversation as her last chance to speak, before formal channels swallowed every personal word. William's deepest anxiety remained Catherine. Before entering the room, he had paused in the corridor and read a short message from his wife, telling him to stay calm and not allow old anger to control the meeting. He had watched her endure public criticism, family tension, and constant comparisons while continuing to perform her responsibilities. Her restraint had not made the pain smaller. It had only made it quieter. Meghan felt that silence differently. She told the prince she had once expected friendship from Catherine, not a rivalry built around clothing, personality, status, and royal rank. Her voice softened as she admitted that the distance had hurt more because she had once believed the two women might understand each other. For several seconds, William listened without interrupting, and the confrontation briefly felt less like a battle than a confession. Harry did not know every detail of what had brought her there. Meghan had requested the meeting personally because she wanted to discover whether the resistance came from palace machinery or from William himself. A courtier waiting outside later described in a documented account how the future king carried a folder into the room but never opened it. The papers gave him authority, yet the decision had already been made in his heart. The true fracture had begun weeks earlier, at a family gathering, when Meghan made a request involving Catherine and the children. She intended it as a path toward reconciliation. William heard something else entirely. Pressure directed at the most protected part of his life. That request became the hidden trigger behind the final meeting, and once its details emerged, the palace could no longer pretend the breakdown had happened gradually. Every family rupture has a moment that later seems larger than it appeared at the time. In this case, it came after a tightly managed Windsor gathering, when Meghan waited until the formal conversations had ended and approached William with a request she believed was reasonable. Catherine had already left the room. Harry was speaking with another relative. What Meghan asked next turned an uneasy truce into a countdown toward the final confrontation. The gathering had been arranged after months of public tension, and every senior relative understood the rules. No one would discuss interviews, memoirs, or old accusations. The occasion would remain private, controlled, and focused on family matters alone. Windsor gatherings are closed royal meetings held inside one of the family's principal residences, where personal conversations are expected to remain confidential. That privacy mattered because even one careless exchange could reopen wounds the palace had spent months trying to contain. William arrived with Catherine and remained guarded from the beginning. He watched every conversation carefully, while she stayed calm and avoided anything that might invite another dispute. Meghan noticed voices lowering when she approached and believed the sudden formality was deliberate. To her, the distance felt less like caution and more like punishment. To the prince, it was protection. The moment changed after Catherine left. Meghan stepped toward William and asked him to arrange a private recorded conversation between herself and his wife. She proposed that both women approve a written summary afterward, then release it publicly as proof that the conflict had ended. A mutually approved statement is a document both sides accept before publication, designed to prevent either person from later disputing what was said. William reacted at once. He set down the glass in his hand and told her that Catherine would not be placed inside a negotiated public reconciliation. He believed the request turned a wounded family relationship into a communications exercise and placed fresh pressure on the woman he had spent years trying to protect. Meghan felt the insult immediately. Her voice tightened as she insisted the recording was not about publicity but protection. Private conversations, she argued, had repeatedly been retold in ways that left her unable to defend herself. She wanted certainty, not performance. Yet the future king heard a demand to make his wife publicly responsible for ending a conflict she had not created. Harry entered near the end and heard only William's refusal. He saw Meghan's shaken expression, assumed she had been dismissed without consideration, and confronted his brother. The prince tried to explain the original proposal, but the damage was already spreading. Within minutes, one conversation had produced 3 different versions of the truth. Later that night, William instructed his private secretary, the senior aide responsible for arranging his official communication, to stop organizing informal discussions with Meghan. She refused to accept that one heated exchange could become permanent policy and requested a final meeting without Harry present. When that final request was accepted, both William and Meghan entered the room, believing they could still control the outcome. But neither was prepared for how quickly restraint would collapse. For the first 20 minutes, both of them remained controlled. Meghan spoke carefully. William listened without interruption. Then Catherine's name entered the conversation, and the discipline holding the meeting together disappeared. William moved his chair back from the table. Meghan stopped mid-sentence. The palace insider remembered the silence more clearly than the raised voices, because in that silence both understood they had reached the sentence from which neither relationship nor reputation could fully recover. Meghan began by returning to the Windsor request. She told William that the recorded conversation had been misunderstood from the start. A documented conversation is a discussion preserved through an agreed recording or written account, so neither side can later change what was said. She insisted the proposal had been designed to protect both women from conflicting versions, not to use Catherine for publicity or force her into a false display of unity. William did not accept that explanation. He told her the problem was no longer one request, one gathering, or one badly judged moment. Years of leaked tensions, disputed memories, public interviews, and private grievances had repeatedly pulled his wife into a conflict she had tried not to deepen. To the prince, every new attempt at clarification seemed to produce another round of accusation. To Meghan, every refusal felt like proof that only one version of the past was allowed to survive. Then the restraint broke. Meghan said Catherine had benefited from remaining silent, while other people defended her. William pushed his chair back and answered, "Do not bring Catherine into this as though her silence was an attack." His voice stayed low, and that made the warning sharper. He did not shout, he did not need to. The future king had drawn the line around the person he believed had carried the cost of this conflict without publicly striking back. Meghan's composure cracked. She asked whether he had ever considered how isolated she had felt while learning royal expectations under constant scrutiny. Her eyes filled, but she refused to apologize for wanting control over her own story. She told him that silence had never protected her. It had only allowed other people to decide what her silence meant. William then disclosed something she had not expected. Catherine had privately discouraged harsher restrictions after earlier disputes, and had urged him to leave room for eventual healing. The admission shook Meghan, because the woman she believed had quietly opposed her had sometimes argued against closing the door. Meghan reached for her own evidence. She offered him private correspondence, showing moments when palace officials had failed to correct damaging stories. William refused to read it. Another archive of grievances, he said, would not rebuild trust. Then he opened the folder. Inside was not a list of accusations. It was a new communications protocol, a formal set of rules controlling future contact, already approved by the highest level of the household. The argument had exposed the pain, but the folder revealed the power. And Meghan was about to learn that William's decision had support far beyond that room. When William opened the folder, Meghan expected notes, warnings, perhaps even a list of conditions. Instead, she saw a formal protocol governing future contact between the Sussex household and the senior royal family. William's name appeared on the final page, but another authorization sat above it. The decision had not been improvised during an angry conversation. It had been considered, circulated, and accepted before Meghan ever crossed the threshold. Meghan read the first page slowly. The protocol required all future discussions involving succession, the Wales children, royal residences, and private family gatherings to pass through designated representatives. A formal protocol is an approved set of rules that controls how contact must happen, while designated representatives are trusted officials authorized to speak for senior royals. Informal promises would no longer carry weight. Private conversations would no longer create expectations. Every word would now pass through structure. William watched her understand what that meant. As heir, the person next in line to the throne, he carried growing responsibility for protecting his immediate family and preparing the monarchy's future shape. Charles remained sovereign, meaning the reigning monarch with final constitutional authority. But the prince's concerns now carried institutional force. This was no longer merely a brother defending his wife. It was a future king deciding where access ended. Charles had faced that choice earlier that morning. He read the protocol alone, removed his glasses, and set the file down without speaking. The king disliked its emotional finality, because approving it meant placing official distance between his sons. Yet he also believed continued uncertainty had become more dangerous than a clear boundary. Every vague promise had created fresh anger. Every informal opening had produced another dispute. The monarch felt torn. Supporting William meant protecting stability, but it also meant accepting that Harry's family would now be handled through official channels rather than parental instinct. The father in him resisted. The sovereign in him understood. Meghan stared at the authorization and asked whether Charles had personally approved excluding her from direct family discussions. William answered that the king had approved structure, not punishment. The distinction meant nothing to her. Structure still closed the door. Procedure still replaced trust. Then another truth emerged. Catherine had neither signed nor requested the protocol. William had deliberately kept her name away from it because he refused to let his wife carry blame for a boundary he considered his own responsibility. Meghan absorbed that silently, but the revelation did not soften the outcome. She refused to sign the acknowledgement page. She closed the folder, slid it back across the table, and warned that formalizing distance would create consequences the palace could not contain. William did not reach for the document. His silence confirmed the decision would stand with or without her consent. Her refusal did not stop the protocol from taking effect, and within hours, the first consequences reached Harry, without Meghan beside him to control how the news was delivered. Harry learned the meeting was over through a call from a palace representative, not from his brother. He was told that future contact involving senior family matters would follow a formal process and that the arrangement was already active. For several seconds, Harry said nothing. Then he asked the question that exposed the wound beneath every public dispute. Did William say this as the heir, or did he say it as my brother? Meghan had not yet returned when the call came. Harry had expected the meeting to be difficult, but he still believed she might reopen a private path toward reconciliation. A palace representative is an authorized official who communicates decisions on behalf of senior royals, and the use of that official made the message feel colder. The protocol was described as an administrative safeguard, meaning a formal system designed to prevent confusion and future disputes. Harry heard something simpler. His brother had replaced direct contact with procedure, and Charles had allowed it. Harry stepped away from the phone, pressed both hands against the edge of a desk, and lowered his head. Anger came first. Humiliation followed. Once again, decisions involving his family had been made in rooms where he was not present, then delivered through someone trained to keep emotion out of every sentence. The Duke had left royal duties to escape control, yet control still seemed to reach him from behind palace doors. Meghan returned carrying the silence of someone who had already replayed every word. Harry asked whether William had listened. She answered, "He listened long enough to close the door properly." The bitterness in her voice told him more than any detailed explanation could. She described the protocol, the refusal, and the unsigned acknowledgement, but she did not tell him everything. Meghan kept one revelation back. William had told her that Catherine had previously discouraged harsher restrictions and had urged him to leave room for family healing. She feared that detail would weaken the clear sense of rejection holding her and Harry together. If his sister-in-law had once argued against closing the door, then the conflict was no longer as simple as one united palace standing against them. William remained alone after the room was cleared. He lifted the unsigned acknowledgement, folded it once, then stopped. A documented account from the insider who entered afterward described no relief in his face. The prince looked like a man who had protected one relationship by surrendering another. He had defended Catherine, but the cost carried his brother's name. Catherine entered his study that evening without an aide. She looked at the folder, then at her husband, and asked whether the boundary had been necessary or whether pain had quietly turned it into permanent exile. The protocol had already altered the family, but Catherine's private intervention would determine whether William's final act was driven by vengeance or by a painful form of protection. Catherine did not enter William's study to congratulate him. She closed the door, sat opposite him, and asked whether the meeting had ended exactly as he expected. William answered that the necessary boundary had been established. Catherine studied him for a long moment before asking a more dangerous question. Was it a boundary you needed, or an ending you were finally ready to choose? For the first time that day, William had no prepared response. Catherine had known the meeting was taking place, but she had not been told the exact words her husband intended to use. She trusted his judgment, yet she also understood how years of anger could hide inside the language of duty. William explained Meghan's refusal to accept the protocol, the unsigned page, and the confrontation over her silence. A protocol is a formal set of rules controlling future contact, but the princess heard something more personal beneath it. A wounded man trying to make uncertainty impossible. William expected her to feel vindicated. Instead, Catherine looked saddened that her name remained at the center of a conflict she had tried to escape. She reached across the desk and placed her hand over the unopened folder. Protecting their children and private life was essential, she told him, but protection should not require him to become emotionally unrecognizable to himself. The prince finally admitted what anger had concealed. He no longer knew how to speak to Harry without hearing every old accusation behind his brother's words. Each attempt at trust seemed to return as another dispute, another public wound, another reason to retreat. His voice tightened as he confessed that the protocol felt easier than one more failed reconciliation. Catherine then revealed something she had never told him. Months earlier, she had sent Meghan a short private message, expressing hope that the family might one day speak without public pressure. The message had gone unanswered. She kept that silence from William because she did not want it turned into another accusation, or used as proof that the door was closed. William absorbed the revelation slowly. It changed the emotional shape of the meeting he had just ended. Meghan may have entered the room believing Catherine had already withdrawn from any personal reconciliation. In that light, the final boundary would not have felt like one man's decision. It would have felt like confirmation that the entire family had rejected her together. The future king did not cancel the protocol. He still believed structure was necessary, but he made one alteration before the night ended. A single private family channel would remain open through him for genuine emergencies, with no aids, statements, or negotiations attached. It was narrow, fragile, and painfully limited, but it was not nothing. That narrow opening could not repair the past, but when the details of the meeting escaped palace walls, it became the only evidence that the rupture had not ended in total emotional abandonment. The palace had built an elaborate structure to contain private conflict, yet one account of the meeting dismantled that control overnight. By sunrise, William's warning, Meghan's refusal, Catherine's hidden intervention, and Harry's devastated question had escaped into public view. The family's most guarded emotions were transformed into headlines, but one front page captured the national mood more powerfully than any television debate. Two faces divided by a closed black door. The leak did not read like a vague palace whisper. It arrived as a detailed insider reconstruction, with precise moments that made the account feel dangerously real. William pushing back his chair, Meghan sliding the folder across the table, and the unsigned acknowledgement left between them. An insider reconstruction is a documented retelling, built from someone familiar with a private event, and its detail gave the public something stronger than rumor. It gave them a story they could emotionally enter. Palace officials answered with restraint. They refused to confirm the exact dialogue, but they did not deny that a private meeting had taken place, or that a new communications arrangement existed. A communications arrangement is a formal system deciding who may speak directly and who must use official representatives. That careful response was meant to contain the damage. Instead, it made many people believe the central account was true. London woke to the headline. A major newspaper placed split portraits of William and Meghan beneath the image of a closed black door, with 4 words across the page: "The last private meeting." Copies disappeared from a kiosk near Buckingham Palace as commuters stopped to argue over who had crossed the final line. Some defended the prince as a future king protecting his wife, children, and institution after years of broken trust. Others saw Meghan as a woman denied direct access to a family, still making decisions about her behind palace walls. Harry watched the story become public spectacle. A broadcaster repeated his private question about whether William had acted as heir or brother, and his expression hardened. The Duke understood that even his most vulnerable moment had become material for debate. His pain was no longer private, it had become content. Then one detail changed the tone. The palace response emphasized that a limited emergency channel remained open through William. That narrow exception, created after Catherine's intervention, prevented the story from becoming one of complete banishment. The princess had not erased the boundary, but she had stopped it from becoming absolute abandonment. William could not control whether the public saw strength or cruelty. Meghan could not control whether people saw rejection or consequence. Both now faced the same final truth. The meeting would be remembered by millions, but its emotional meaning would be decided only by those who had survived it. The world had chosen its headlines, yet the final verdict would not be written by newspapers. It would be defined by what William, Meghan, Harry, and Catherine accepted once the noise finally faded. The last private meeting between William and Meghan did not produce reconciliation. There was no embrace, no dramatic apology, and no promise that the family would return to what it had once hoped to become. Instead, it produced something colder, but more honest, a boundary neither side could misunderstand. The meeting ended the illusion that smiles, ceremonies, or carefully worded statements could repair trust that had never been privately rebuilt. Meghan remained outside direct royal decision-making, while formal representatives handled official contact, and William maintained strict protection around Catherine and the Wales children. A formal representative is an authorized palace official who communicates on behalf of senior royals, ensuring that every message follows an approved process. This outcome mattered because private access had once carried emotional meaning. Now, procedure stood where trust had failed. The limited emergency channel remained open. William had closed informal negotiation, but he had not erased the family connection completely. Genuine emergencies could still reach him directly, without aids, statements, or political bargaining. That narrow opening became the final compromise. Distance without complete abandonment. William accepted that protecting the monarchy could make him appear cold and unforgiving. Yet Catherine's question had forced him to confront the danger of turning duty into emotional cruelty. The prince kept the protocol, but he removed the sense of absolute exile. He chose stability, though the decision cost him the comforting belief that family loyalty could survive every wound. Meghan accepted a different truth. She could no longer change his mind through one final private conversation. The unsigned acknowledgement remained her refusal to endorse his version of their relationship. But she stopped seeking a political settlement through Catherine. Her silence afterward was not surrender. It was recognition that the old route back had closed. Harry saw the decision as a painful defeat in his bond with his brother. Still, the emergency channel gave him one certainty. William had not completely stopped being family. Catherine, meanwhile, emerged not as the architect of exclusion, but as the person who prevented the boundary from becoming permanent exile. She had not repaired the rupture, yet she had protected the last fragile thread. The palace insider's documented account delivered its strongest revelation quietly. Both William and Meghan showed pain after the confrontation. Neither walked away victorious. The meeting was not a triumph over an enemy. It was an admission that their relationship could no longer survive without distance. This moment marked the death of forced royal unity and the beginning of controlled separation. For William, it meant choosing stability over sentimental hope. For Meghan, it meant accepting that her place outside the institution was permanent. For Harry, it confirmed that brotherhood could survive only in a narrower form. For the monarchy, the verdict was brutal but clear. Peace is not always reconciliation. Sometimes peace begins when two sides stop pretending trust still exists. The palace door closed on their final private negotiation, not with forgiveness and not with revenge, but with a boundary that finally told the truth. And that truth became the only ending any of them could honestly accept. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.